Ukraine invasion heats up the debate for longer military conscription in Taiwan. Operation Cold Surge. NATO forces wrap up a frosty month of military drills. Rubles for gas. Europe faces Russia's gas deadline. Plus, we take you center stage to one of Taiwan's largest music festivals. A warm welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Yin Khvat. In Taiwan, men born after 1994 must serve 4 months of military conscription. But with the Russian invasion of Ukraine and an aggressive neighbour of its own, Taiwan is considering extending its mandatory military service. TaiwanPlus reporter Bing Wang has more.
On high alert, reservists in Taiwan undergo training in a newly intensified program to improve the country's combat readiness. Following Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the government began implementing measures to bolster its defenses. Now the country is debating whether to extend military conscription service from 4 months to 1 year. Some Taiwanese are excited about the prospect.
虽然我是台德混血，但是因为我几乎土生土长在台湾，所以我愿意为了这片国家、这片国土上战场。
But the debate that's been going on for weeks has raised concerns about when a decision will be made. On Thursday, Taiwan's Defense Minister Cho Guozhen offered an apology for a lack of a concrete timeline.
我跟各位资料致歉，目前我没有肯定答案，但我们按照这个期程在做，不会那么样的离谱，对不对？时间一切，你早一天到1月2就没事，晚一天抱歉就变1年，不会有这种状况的啊，这一点是我很肯定的。
In the last few years, China has stepped up its military pressure on Taiwan through frequent incursions into the country's air defense zone. Beijing has also not ruled out a full-scale invasion. That's despite the fact that the People's Republic of China has never ruled Taiwan. But Russia's invasion of Ukraine has now prompted Taiwan's defense ministry to set up a group to study the tactics behind how a smaller country has managed to resist a much larger and better equipped enemy. Perhaps the group will shed more light on whether increasing the conscription time will make a difference in the country's readiness to defend itself. Chris Ma and Bing Wang for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan's economy minister says that the country's power grid is ready to meet peak demand this summer. That's despite a fire last month at a power plant in northern Taiwan and news that a COVID outbreak has delayed work on a new generator at another plant. Minister Wang Meihua's reassurances follow several blackouts in recent weeks, including a nationwide outage on March 3rd attributed to human error. On Friday, the lights went out in parts of Kaohsiung. This time, a squirrel was declared the culprit. Reactions to the Taiwan government's new rent subsidy initiative are mixed, with many questioning its effectiveness. On Thursday, the government announced a massive increase to its program aimed at helping younger people. Eric Gao reports.
Out of reach. With sky-high real estate prices, most people in Taiwan have no real chance of buying their own home and have to rent instead. Taiwan's government announced a massive expansion to its rental subsidy program on Thursday, increasing both the funding available and the number of recipients. However, many people think the program won't be very effective.
我觉得就那个条件，然后加上房东的意愿上来讲的话，也不一定可以申请到，所以这方面的话就还要再跟房东沟通，不一定有帮助。
租房子租了快7、8年了，但根本就从来没申请过这东西。你不租，别人还要租嘛？那他可能你想报，他不用给你报，他就租给别人就好了，何必租给你呢？
Aside from the extra paperwork required to be included in the subsidy program, landlords may also be disinclined to take part because of tax reasons. Landlords still have to pay property and land taxes on rental units, which are higher than for primary residences.
有多户的房子在出租，这种房东会担心，就是说借由有房客去申请租金补贴，把他其他的租赁的行为租给一般房客，没有就是如实缴税的这样的部分都给揭露跟勾稽出来。
The real effects of the program will be seen when applications for the subsidies begin in July. Damon Lin and Eric Gao for TaiwanPlus.
The first of this year's round of civil defence drills kicked off on Thursday in the southern city of Kaohsiung. The exercises test the readiness of local governments to respond to emergencies like natural disasters. This year, for the first time, the drills simulated an attack from China. Members of the public practiced escaping from a plane brought down by a missile. First responders simulated searching for survivors in a collapsed building, while others made emergency repairs to water mains and power lines. Kaohsiung's mayor Chen Chi-mai said the wartime scenario was included this year because of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. 10 more drills will take place around the country from now until June. Armed forces from 27 countries are wrapping up what is one of the largest NATO exercises in the Arctic. The drills, known as Cold Response 2022, come with a heightened sense of urgency after Russia invaded Ukraine. Jaime Ocon has the details.
With hands numb from freezing Arctic temperatures, these soldiers are wrapping up one of NATO's largest military drills. For the past month, through ice and snow, NATO troops have been simulating combat scenarios in Norway with state forces from 27 nations.
Alors le terrain grand froid, bon, c'est quelque chose qu'on maîtrise plutôt bien. Là, les températures, c'est à peu près les mêmes qu'en France en hiver. Après ici, le plus important, ça va être l'entraînement interallié, donc avec tout ce qui est nations étrangères. Ça c'est quelque chose qu'on fait pas souvent.
Over 30,000 international troops are practicing a rapid response to any potential attacks on NATO allies. Dubbed Cold Response 2022, they're using a variety of equipment like these tanks equipped with special lasers. And with the war in Ukraine raging, many soldiers say that they're inspired by the resilience of Ukraine's forces.
It's really cool to see kind of how Ukraine, as a small country with not really that big of an army, has taken on the behemoth that's called Russia, and how they've kind of just set their will to fight, and how that really works. If people actually want to be there, want to defend their home country, they will. And that's inspiring to see. It's inspiring to see because we're Norway, we don't have the biggest military, but I think if Russia came, we would have the, courage. We would fight for ourselves.
The exercises, which were planned well before the invasion of Ukraine, have taken on a sense of urgency. Military officials are hoping to use these drills to enhance the overall combat readiness of NATO's forces around Europe.
The lesson learned here is you can't predict what a dictator might do. You have to respect the capabilities that they have, and you have to be ready to respond.
With NATO keeping a close eye on the war in Ukraine, it hopes these exercises will serve as a symbol of collective security to deter conflicts from spreading in Europe. Jaime Ocon for TaiwanPlus.
A Moscow demand for unfriendly states to use Russian rubles to purchase gas comes into effect on Friday. Those countries include the US, UK and EU member states. Russia is the world's largest exporter of gas, and the decision comes as the US releases its largest amount of oil reserves in its history. James Chater reports.
As relations between Russia and the West deteriorate further, gas exports have become the latest weapon in Moscow's arsenal.
Чтобы приобрести российский природный газ, они должны открыть рублевые счета в российских банках. Именно с этих счетов будет вестись оплата газа, поставленного начиная с завтрашнего дня, с 1 апреля текущего года.
From Friday, so-called unfriendly states will need to use Russian currency to purchase gas from the country. The ruble collapsed in value when Russia invaded Ukraine, making it much harder for Moscow to buy essential imports. Since then, the ruble has recovered much lost ground, and after Putin's announcement, it strengthened again. However, Germany, one of the main purchasers of Russian gas, said payments would be made according to contracts as they were written.
Die Antwort ist sehr, sehr kurz. Wir haben die Verträge angeschaut über die Gaslieferung und die anderen Lieferungen. Darin steht drin, dass in Euro gezahlt wird, manchmal in Dollar, aber in der Regel in Euro.
Putin's decision comes as US President Joe Biden announced a release of oil from the National Strategic Petroleum Reserves, 1 million barrels every day for 6 months from May.
This is a wartime bridge to increase oil supply until production ramps up later this year. And it is by far the largest release of our national reserve in our history.
Benchmark oil prices soared around 35% after Russia's invasion began in February, and that's largely because of sanctions biting the world's second-largest oil-exporting nation. The oil supply squeeze from Russia has pushed up fuel prices around the world. James Rayner and James Chater for TaiwanPlus.
Russia has said it will open humanitarian corridors for civilians to escape the besieged Ukrainian city of Mariupol, with Moscow promising a temporary ceasefire. Thousands are expected to evacuate the southeastern port city for Ukrainian-held Zaporizhzhia, which is further west and inland. Mariupol has seen some of the war's worst suffering, including alleged Russian war crimes. It was home to more than 430,000 people before Russia launched its invasion of Ukraine on February 24th. Local authorities estimate the remaining population is around 100,000. Meanwhile, peace talks are due to resume on Friday via video following face-to-face talks earlier in the week in Istanbul. Chinese and EU leaders hold a virtual summit on Friday, the first between the two powers in nearly 2 years. The war in Ukraine is expected to top the agenda, but controversies over EU member states developing ties with Taiwan are also expected to hang over discussions. In December last year, Lithuania closed its embassy in Beijing amid worsening relations with China. Many Lithuanian imports have since been blocked from entering China. The EU has since drafted a legal instrument to counter economic coercion from third parties, widely thought to be in response to the Chinese measures. For more on how the discussions will be impacted by the Ukraine war, our reporter James Chater spoke to Max Lin, a political scientist specializing in Chinese-European relations at Taiwan's Donghai University.
I won't say it's normal, but the background is very complicated because the Russia, they invade Ukraine makes things become even harder. But for EU, they also need the leverage from China because their trade, their domestic market really rely on Chinese cheap products. So they have the room to cooperate, but hardly they can have I will say the real improvement is hard.
And what do you think the prospects are of China and the EU finding common ground on some of the kind of key issues of contention they currently have? And I'm especially thinking here of kind of controversies surrounding Lithuania developing closer ties with Taiwan.
Europe, now they see Taiwan as a leveraged power. Of course, they don't want Beijing control or take over Taiwan, not only just because the Taiwan individual issue, but also is involved the South China Sea, about their free trade. So I think they will try to help Taiwan, and because they're always thinking about today Ukraine and tomorrow maybe Taiwan. Of course, Taiwan is not Ukraine, but that will inspire them to think. When they work with China, they will think twice before what they do.
So in all, do you think that Europe is currently united or divided on its approach to China?
Some people, they do misunderstand European Union because they are not a country. They are an international organization, the successful regional organization. Of course, how can you expect an organization or union that works without any different voice? But in the end, because they have the shared value, they have the same system, they have the same political ideology. So, although consider these differences, but in the end, they will work together. I believe that.
There is lots of talk about China's support of Russia, but what about India, the only major country close to the United States that has not condemned the invasion of Ukraine? Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov is on a trip to New Delhi, with Indian and Russian officials reportedly set to discuss a rupee-ruble way of paying for oil and other goods. While support for Russia is strong within India, the war is having a cost, as Louise Watt reports.
protests in India's capital New Delhi earlier this week over a government hike in fuel and cooking gas prices. India imports 80% of its oil needs, and the cost of crude has risen after Russia invaded Ukraine. It's the latest in a string of protests against fuel prices by the youth wing of India's opposition Congress Party. The prices threaten to add to already high inflation and jeopardize India's economic recovery from the pandemic. There are reports of some Indians already cutting down on fried food and vegetables. But despite these knock-on effects, 5 weeks on, the Indian government has still not condemned the Russian invasion. New Delhi has been walking a fine line between the West and Moscow, which is India's main defence supplier. It has relied on Russia for military and international political support for decades. On the day of the invasion, Prime Minister Narendra Modi, in a phone call with Russian President Vladimir Putin, appealed for an immediate cessation of violence. But over the past few weeks, India has abstained 5 times at the United Nations from condemning Russia's invasion. Many Indians support their government's stance, including this doctor who took part in a demonstration 2 days after the invasion, calling for the safe return of Indian students trapped in Ukraine.
I think somewhere it is very right. I know our Indians are stuck in Ukraine and people would be thinking that they should have supported Ukraine. But I must say that Russia has always supported India, and I think going against Russia would have been totally wrong for the future and even for now.
But there are those who disagree, like this 25-year-old student.
I don't think it's the right thing at all, because war anywhere has to be condemned. War by anybody has to be condemned. And if India is trying to make a mark in the world politics, India cannot get away with abstaining against war.
But India, like China, has resisted Western pressure to take a stronger stand against the invasion and continues to buy Russian oil and other goods. Early this week, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov emphasized Moscow's growing ties with the Asian giants as the war in Ukraine rages.
С Китаем у нас отношения лучшие за всю историю их существования. У нас развивается особо привилегированное стратегическое партнерство с Индией.
Lavrov was in China on Wednesday before traveling to India. It is these two distinct relations with Moscow that have officials in Delhi closely watching developments in Ukraine. India has several disputes with China, and 2 years ago armed conflict broke out between them over a border dispute. If Moscow ends up substantially weaker after its invasion of Ukraine, there are fears it could become more dependent on China, and this would be unsettling for India. Patrick Chen and Louise Watt for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan recorded 236 new cases of COVID-19 on Friday. 104 were local infections, a new daily high for 2022. The remaining 132 cases were imported. The latest cases come as Taiwan heads into a long weekend that includes Children's Day and the Tomb Sweeping Festival, when large numbers of people are expected to be on the move. Governments across the world are beginning to ease COVID-19 restrictions or lifting them altogether to get back to the pre-pandemic normal. John Van Trieste has this roundup.
After 2 years of border closures and heavy restrictions, international travel to many parts of the world is about to get much easier. Hong Kong had imposed some of the world's toughest pandemic rules, but from April 1st, quarantine times for vaccinated residents returning from abroad will be shortened to 7 days. The city is also preparing to lift a ban on flights from the US, UK, and 7 other countries.
並且理順入境檢疫嘅安排，詳細嘅情況咧係如下。呢度講得詳細啲，因為好多香港人喺海外都好關心啊，或者係諗住要離境稍後翻嚟，究竟個情況係點樣呢？
Japan is considering raising its cap on daily entries from 7,000 to 10,000. This overseas arrival limit currently applies to both foreign and Japanese nationals. Tourism is still off the table, but if the cap is raised, foreign students will get priority as Japan's academic year starts in April. New Zealand is reopening to Australians, a significant step given that around 40% of the country's tourists come from across the Tasman Sea.
In short, we're ready to welcome the world back. And today I can confirm, from 11:59 p.m. Tuesday, 12 April, vaccinated Australians can travel to New Zealand. And from 11:59 p.m. Sunday, the 1st of May, vaccinated travellers from visa waiver countries and those with valid visitor visas can travel to New Zealand.
That's in contrast to Malaysia, which is opening up to the world. From April 1st, the Southeast Asian country welcomes all vaccinated visitors without the need to quarantine. Thailand, too, is looking to welcome more tourists. Visitors will need to test negative on arrival, with a maximum quarantine of 24 hours until they get a negative result. The United Kingdom, though, is going a step further by scrapping all COVID-related travel restrictions and stopping the use of quarantine hotels. Despite a rising number of COVID cases, the country is leading the push to a return to pre-pandemic life. Klein Wong and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
The 13th Megaport Music Festival rocked the southern city of Kaohsiung with a record 100 acts and 100,000 attendees. Yvonne Yang went behind the scenes of one of Taiwan's most vibrant music events.
Sunshine, music, food, and the sea. This is Megaport Festival, one of the most iconic music festivals in Taiwan. Megaport director Danny Wang explains why they decided to hold it at Love Pier in the southern city of Kaohsiung.
就是因为高雄这个地方对我们来讲是一个非常开阔，然后这个港边的感觉视野非常的这个怎么讲外放吗？对，然后又是一个热情奔放。
This year, Megaport had 10 stages and a crowd of over 100,000 people. The organizers worked around the clock to pull it off without a hitch. But Megaport's Viv Liu says that not every year has been so easy. The harbor has been under construction for more than a decade.
所以因此我们的舞台其实也很艰巨，是要挑战是。 我们今年可以把这个舞台放这边，明年这个地方不能用了，他们在施工了，然后这里要盖轻轨了，然后这里要盖东西了，所以其实这个是很困难，但是相对是好的。
Megaport is pushing its limits every year. The city government even built a bridge to accommodate the festival.
桥也不是说我们盖一条，是因为我们那时候人数已经到了一个程度，然后因为市政府其实文化局高雄政府其实很相挺这个活动。我们说，我们没有办法再更多了。他说不行啊，要让更多高雄人一起来。我说没有地啊，他们去帮我们找，然后找说，对面那个仓库就是现在桥过去那个地方是可以用的。我们说，人怎么过去？说。 好像可以盖一条桥，然后这个我们哪可能想得到这种事情？我们这个连那个预算都在想的团队，谁在想盖桥的事情？
See this yacht that I'm standing on right now? It's not just a boat, it's Dayu Malu, one of the stages at Megaport Festival. And behind me on the shore, you can see people lining up, waiting to come on board with their favorite artist. Let me show you around.
These fans and artists are embarking on an hour-long adventure. For singer-songwriter Linian, even though he's performed at Megaport before, this is nothing like last time.
这次是完全是新的一个尝试，就没有在大熊湾演出过，也没有在船上这样放歌过，对，完全是一个算蛮新的体验的。而且我刚刚就开关就打开了，我就是会有一个演出开关，就是私底下可能比较安静一点，但是演出的时候就会比较吵一点。
One of the most unique features of Megaport is the NGO Village. Back in 2015, the organizers created a space for people to learn more about civic groups and their missions. The village showcases the freedom of speech in Taiwan. So what makes Megaport so unique? For the organizers, it's the location, the massive harbor that gives the festival its name.
它不是只是海港旁边的一块地，它是让你环港。 的这种感觉，然后所以以地景，然后再加上因为相对应的建设，不管是高流，不管是大港桥，它这个地景的指标性就非常的就是重要。然后我觉得因此这个是无可取代，因为你不太可能有另外一个港口跟高雄港一样这么样的壮丽。
The story of Megaport is not just about a passionate group of musicians with a wild dream. It's about a whole city coming together and even changing the shape of the skyline to make way for a musical experience that you have to see and hear for yourself. Kamashi and Yvonne Young for TaiwanPlus.
Thank you for watching Taiwan Plus News. I'm Yin Khvat. Finally today, we leave you with some images of Sesame Street theme park in the American city of San Diego. For more stories from Taiwan and around the world, please download the Taiwan Plus app. Stay safe and see you next time.